before I start, I'll have to tell you that everything I say is true.
She finally turned around. No one was there.
All of a sudden, we heard a sound up on stage.
I've been asked to tell some stories about ghosts from this building, and I have several to tell, but we have witches also. But before I start, I'll have to tell you that everything I say is true if you choose to believe it. When I first started working here years ago, there was an old teacher working in the old part of the building. I won't say her name because she might still be alive. Her students said she was a witch, and they claimed that she could do things magically. She lived alone, no husband, but she had 40 cats, and she always wore her hair up. Once I walked by her room early in the morning when no one else was here, and she was reading from a big book, and her hair was down, and it went all the way past her knees. The students told me one day that a boy in her class asked to go to the bathroom over and over again, and she kept on denying him. Finally, he stood up and yelled at her, and she looked at her door, and it slowly swung shut and clasped. Another time she was teaching about the Bible, and one of her students denied that any of this was real. And he said he wasn't going to hell. And she said, "You might burn in hell." And she looked over at her wastebasket, and a fire started. These are true. I often spend Saturdays here working to catch up. And one Saturday afternoon, I heard the chairs in the room above me being shifted. And I thought Mr. Tellefson was here, so I went up to say hi. But he wasn't in his room and the lights were off. So I came back down and I heard the chairs shifting again, and I went up and the chairs were all facing in the other direction. That's a real ghost story. The last one I have is the best. Our librarian was in the library after school doing record keeping, and she was back in the reference section. She had a clipboard and she heard tap, tap, tap. And she looked down the row of windows and thought perhaps a bird was pecking on it. And she went back to her work, and then she heard tap, 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 a little faster. And she thought maybe someone was throwing pebbles at the window. She went back to her work. And then she heard tap, 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 faster. And so she went to the window to look out. There was nothing there. But at that moment, the ceiling collapsed and fell right where she was standing.
He was teaching, had a heart attack, and passed away. The librarians have experienced many unusual and unexplainable events. You heard Mr. Roloff experience one of these events firsthand, but that is just the beginning. The assistant librarian is no longer here, but may have been the playful target with these events. One time she was in the back room washing her dishes when a student continued to tap on her shoulder. She asked him to stop, and she would be with him in a minute, but the student persisted. When she finally turned around, no one was there. The main librarian, who does not want to be pictured on this film, has reported books levitating up and flying across the room multiple times, as well as blinds going up and down when she's working.
So my story starts right here at the podium. There was a girl that was giving a speech, and all of a sudden, we heard a sound up on stage. Didn't think much of it. Thought a light clip or something dropped, and we continued. But then when the speeches were done, I decided to go up on stage. It was in this area. I looked down and I picked up a pair of children's scissors. I thought there was some kid up on third floor in a classroom that took a pair of children's scissors and put it through a hole that dropped. So I went up to the teacher upstairs and I said, why are you having your kids drop children's scissors through a hole? And the teacher said, we don't have any children's scissors. We weren't working with anything dealing with that. So what was it? I don't know. Children's scissors? At a high school? Just dropping out of thin air? You decide.
None of the other ones, except that one.